Hey guys, Karenology here. Get ready because this story is pure chaos from start to finish. They came for Lena the same morning. She finished laying fresh gravel at the gate. I was in the back barn, reshaping the heel on a pair of boots for Sheriff Mosley. He'd worn them to a cattle auction last month and stepped in something no man should carry home. I didn't hear the engines until they'd already kicked up half our dust road. When I stepped outside, the wind carried voices. Official ones. Clipped. Cold. 2 SUVs and a county sedan stood, parked sideways at the front gate, blocking the entrance like it was a crime scene. I squinted through the sunlight, half blinded, and caught sight of the Homeowner Association logo stenciled on the door of one. That didn't make sense. We'd never been under their jurisdiction. This land had been in my family since 1909, passed from my grandfather to my father, and to me. We weren't part of that grid of newer homes 2 miles out. That was their territory, with their white fences and ornamental mailboxes. Lena stood at the gate, hands on her hips, saying nothing. She wore her usual plaid shirt, sleeves rolled up, boots caked in dirt. Next to the men in polos and clipboards, she looked like something carved out of stone, timeless, unmoved. I walked up beside her, gave her a glance. She didn't look at me, but her jaw had that locked set I'd only seen once before, when a coyote dragged off one of her goats. "Afternoon," I said. My voice always gets quieter when I'm mad. "You boys lost?" A woman stepped forward, sunglasses too big for her narrow face. She had that short, platinum blonde bob that always seems more helmet than hair. Her badge said, Regional Compliance Director. Her voice was sugar-coated acid. "We're here under Directive 48B, Subzone Reassessment. This property has now fallen under the revised oversight of the Greenleaf Development Homeowner Association. Due to recent zoning modifications, your holdings are now subject to review and compliance." "This here's Bishop land," I said. "Always has been. I've got the title and my daddy's name etched in the courthouse stone." She smiled, like someone humoring a child. "We'll need to see documentation today, or we'll have to proceed with official reclamation procedures." Lena finally spoke. Her voice was calm, even. "You're standing on federal grant land that was deeded in 1953 through a Veterans Homestead Act." The woman blinked, lips twitching. One of the clipboard men leaned in to whisper something. She recovered fast. "We'll verify. In the meantime, you are not to make any alterations to the property. No construction, no livestock relocation, no changes to landscape. Any such activity will be considered obstruction." They turned and left. No paperwork, no handshake, just dust and silence. We stood there a moment. Lena didn't speak. I didn't either. The cicadas filled the air like they always did when trouble came around. Finally, I muttered, "Well, that's a first." She just nodded and walked back to the goat shed. That night, over meatloaf and silence, I asked her, "You recognize that woman?" "No," she said, "but I recognize the tactic. Cut off logistics. Divide land. Intimidate quietly. It's Occupation 101. "This isn't war," I said. She looked at me. "To them, it might be." I didn't sleep much. Something about the whole visit itched at me like a wool collar. Next morning, a drone buzzed the yard. Not just one of those plastic toys, either. Big, with a camera and black shell. It hovered over the goat pen, circled twice, then zipped back toward the HOA housing area like it had done a job well. I went into the garage, found my old camcorder, the one we used when the kids were little. I started recording everything. That same afternoon, our mailbox was knocked down. A nail had been driven through the hinge, clean and intentional. Lena didn't even blink. She was cataloging items from the shed. When I asked her why, she said, "Documenting what we had before it disappears." I didn't like the look in her eye. 2 days later, the electricity went out. Just us. The rest of the road was lit like a Christmas tree. Power company said it was a billing error. Took them 48 hours to restore it. On the third day, I found a note nailed to our barn door. Unauthorized occupancy under development review. Immediate contact required. That was when I knew. This wasn't about a zoning error. This was a test. And we were just getting started. When I was a boy, my daddy used to say, "A man's land is his bones turned outward." I never understood that until now. The next morning, Lena was already outside before sunup. She'd drawn a map, hand-sketched, with little red circles and notations in sharp, precise lettering. She'd mapped the entire property, including all the hidden boundaries the county might have accidentally omitted. She moved with the calmness of someone preparing for something inevitable. I stood on the porch, drinking coffee, watching her work like she was back on some mission in the Pacific. She had that same quiet focus I saw once when our old dog went missing. And she spent 3 days tracking paw prints through the woods until she found him tangled in a fence, half starved but alive. Mid-morning brought another surprise. A man in a windbreaker and khakis showed up in a white pickup with no plates. Said he was from environmental oversight. Asked if we had permits for livestock waste disposal. Lena didn't flinch. We compost," she said, "on private soil. This land is exempt." He scribbled something on a form that looked like it was printed off an old inkjet. Then he took photos of our goats, of the chicken coop, of the vegetable beds. I stepped between him and the barn. "You get what you need?" He mumbled something about compliance and drove off. I noted the truck had a green leaf sticker in the corner of the windshield. By sunset, 3 more letters had been taped to our gate. One was a notice of unauthorized fencing modifications. The fence in question had been there since 1984. Another accused us of landscape disruption. The third was a warning that if we continued to operate livestock housing without proper registration, we'd be fined. I sat on the porch swing, chewing on a toothpick, and asked Lena, "You ever think about going public with this? Media, I mean." She looked up from a pile of folders. "Public wants blood or spectacle, not slow erosion." "Still," I said, "seems like they're trying to force a sale." "Actually, they are," she said. "They've done it before. Quiet acquisitions, turn farms into green districts, solar money, rezoning profits. We're a splinter in their grid." That night, we heard footsteps outside the barn. Heavy ones. I grabbed my old shotgun, empty but loud, and stepped out. No one in sight. But a trail of boot prints led up to the wall and vanished. The next morning, we found the back paddock gate open. 2 goats missing. We followed hoof prints all the way to the end of the road. where they abruptly stopped. Tire tracks picked up from there. Lena didn't say a word. She just picked up the phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, Richard, she said. It's me. I need your eyes. Bring your cameras. I hadn't heard that name in decades. Richard was an old Navy intelligence guy. Used to run reconnaissance missions and later became a private security expert. He showed up that evening in a beat-up RV loaded with gadgets that looked straight out of a spy novel. Cameras, motion sensors, parabolic mics. We walked the perimeter while he muttered to himself. Planted 2 trail cams, set up motion alerts on the gate. He even gave Lena a pen that turned out to be a miniature recorder. Before bed, he said, "They're watching you. Time to watch back." The next day brought something new. A drone crashed in our orchard, smashed into a pecan tree. Lena retrieved the memory card before the thing powered down completely. We watched the footage on my old laptop. Aerial views of our barn, close-ups of our license plates, and worst of all, a 30-second clip of Lena standing alone in the garden, looking up. She stared at the screen a long time. This isn't just a local HOA, she said finally. They've got private contractors. Surveillance grade. Probably ex-Fed. You thinking what I'm thinking? She nodded. If they want a quiet fight, they picked the wrong farm. Richard stayed the night. So did his dog, a shaggy mutt named Radar that barked at shadows and trees alike. That mutt had better instincts than most men I knew. That week, we got organized. Lena started logging every incident. Timestamp, photo documented. Richard dug into property records, cross-checked deed transfers, and found something buried. A clause from 1953, exempting our land from local municipal reclassification. You're not just exempt, he said. You're protected. Military legacy zone. This clause predates the Homeowner Association by 40 years. They can't touch you. Legally. But we both knew legality was only half the battle. If they couldn't beat us by law, they'd try to scare us out. That night, our gate was cut clean through. That's when Lena said it. They've made their move. Now we make ours. When Lena sets her mind to something, you'd better clear the road or be ready to get run over. The morning after they cut our gate, she was already dressed in her old Navy boots, hair tied back in a way that made her look 10 years younger. She was calculating, calm, and carrying a legal pad filled with notes. That's never a good sign for whoever's on the other side. She started with the county clerk's office, took the old Dodge down there herself while I stayed back, installing reinforcements on the new gate. Richard ran diagnostics on the surveillance equipment. His mutt, Radar, patrolled like a soldier with 4 legs. Lena came back just before lunch, eyes sharper than I'd seen in years. They filed a zone annexation last year, she said, slamming a thick file on the kitchen table. Claimed our land was abandoned. Used a shell signature. The name on it? Eleanor Ray. I blinked. Ella Ray from the community board? That old bat? Lena nodded. She's the paper trail. Filed it with the help of Greenleaf's legal division. The Homeowner Association needed a loophole to grab this land, and they used her name to claim it was uninhabited. There's a date stamp on the form 3 months before we even moved back in. They forged it. She nodded. Or coerced her? Either way, it's illegal. But we'll need proof. Richard whistled through his teeth. cozy little racket they've got here. And I bet they've done this before. We sat in silence for a long while. Then Lena leaned back, cracking her knuckles. We need to rattle their cage. The plan was simple, but precise. Lena and Richard went into town and filed a counterclaim, attaching the 1953 Military Exemption Clause. Meanwhile, I visited our neighbors. Most of them had been on their land as long as we had. Quiet folks, older, suspicious of outsiders but not of me. I told them what was happening, shared copies of the drone footage, the fake letters, the cut gate. 2 neighbors admitted they'd also been pressured. Subtle at first, then aggressive. One, Mr. Gilroy, said his barn had mysteriously caught fire a week after refusing an offer from someone connected to Greenleaf. Another, Mrs. Patterson, a retired school librarian, said someone had stolen her property markers and replaced them with stakes 12 feet inward. But they think we won't fight, she said, her voice shaking. They think we'll roll over and sell. Not this time, I told her. That night, Lena sat at the dining room table drafting a formal complaint to the county attorney. Richard was compiling an evidence package. I fried bacon and eggs for dinner because sometimes the body needs comfort food before a battle. Then came the sound we'd been half expecting. Tires on gravel. Slow. Deliberate. 2 unmarked trucks pulled up to the gate. Men in khakis and work shirts stepped out. 5 of them. No badges. No introductions. Just the kind of silent posture that says, "We're here to scare you." I stepped onto the porch, shotgun across my lap. Lena stood in the doorway behind me, arms crossed. One of the men called out, "We're here for a survey inspection. Need access to your perimeter." Got a warrant?" I asked. He didn't answer. Just stared. Then slowly reached into his back pocket. I tightened my grip. "Careful, friend, real careful." He paused, then pulled out a clipboard. A blank form. "We'll come back with the team," he said. "You're delaying a legal process." I stood up, walked down the steps. "No, you're trespassing and you're leaving." He looked at the others. No one moved. Finally, they turned, climbed back into their trucks, and left. That's when I realized something. They weren't just bold. They were testing our response time, our numbers, our nerves. They were preparing for something bigger. Later that night, Richard called me out to the barn. "You need to see this." He'd reviewed one of the motion sensor captures. The footage showed a man sneaking along the back fence, kneeling to take soil samples. Another clip showed someone placing small, unmarked stakes deep in the thicket, probably to claim the boundary. "Amico, we're being surveyed," Richard said. "Illegally." Lena stared at the screen, then picked up her phone. Who you calling?" I asked. The press," she said. "Time to make some noise." And just like that, the silence we'd kept for weeks shattered. It wasn't about holding ground anymore. It was about making it too damn loud for them to keep hiding. By the next morning, there were reporters on our gravel drive. The reporter's name was Brenda Sloan. Middle-aged, no nonsense, with a voice like gravel, and eyes that had seen too many city council meetings go sideways. She wasn't local, but her uncle lived 2 farms over, and had tipped her off when he saw the drones. Brenda didn't waste time. She arrived with a cameraman named Doug, and a drone of her own. One of those newer models with 4K clarity and a longer flight time than I thought legal. Lena met her at the gate, calm as ever. Brenda asked for a tour. Lena handed her a folder instead. Photos, time-stamped videos. The 1953 Pre-exemption clause. The drone crash footage. Everything. Brenda whistled low. They picked the wrong veterans. They picked the wrong land, Lena corrected. The story aired online the same night. It wasn't a national bombshell, but it rippled hard through our little county. By the next morning, neighbors we hadn't seen in months were stopping by to ask questions. Some brought pie, others brought old documents, and a few brought memories. Tales of threats, lost deeds, mysteriously vanishing animals. Ella Ray, the woman whose name had been used on the zoning document, came by with trembling hands and tears in her eyes. They told me it was just a formality. Said I was doing the community a favor. I didn't know they were taking your land. I swear to you. Lena just nodded. Then help us fix it. That afternoon, Ella gave Brenda a sworn statement, recorded on camera. It aired the following day and hit local radio within hours. Then came the threats, anonymous letters, phone calls in the night. One of the barn cameras was ripped clean off its post and thrown through our front porch window. Richard replaced it with 2 more. We reinforced the glass. The Homeowner Association tried to spin their narrative, sent out a community-wide letter claiming we were refusing cooperation, delaying sustainability projects, and, my personal favorite, posing an ecological hazard through unregulated livestock care. That one made Lena laugh out loud. I kept goats on a battleship for 6 months, she said. This is nothing. Things escalated fast. The HOA filed a motion with the county to invoke emergency developmental jurisdiction, an obscure clause that would allow them to forcibly survey and prepare land deemed as transitional priority property. Sounded bureaucratic. Meant they wanted permission to bulldoze. We filed a counter motion. Richard helped write it, citing everything from federal land use precedents to local mismanagement. Brenda published both documents online with commentary. Public opinion turned fast. Then came the town meeting, held in the old high school auditorium, with chairs that groaned under every seated weight, and a podium older than I was. The place was packed. Locals, reporters, farmers, HOA board members, in stiff suits that didn't fit their shoulders. They called our case early. I stepped to the microphone, heart pounding, and told our story. From the forged documents to the surveillance, the sabotage, the fear. When I finished, Lena stood beside me, unfolded a faded map, and pointed at the section marked in red. This land was deeded as part of a post-war veteran program, she said, voice clear and strong. It's not for sale. It's not for seizure. It's not for silence. There was applause. Not polite claps. Real applause. Loud. From calloused hands and tired hearts. Then the HOA's attorney spoke. Young man. Slick haircut. Looked like he ironed his shoelaces. He called our evidence anecdotal, our resistance obstructionist, and accused us of weaponizing nostalgia. Lena leaned toward the mic. Sir, if memory is a weapon, then yes. I'm fully armed. The room went quiet. Then someone laughed. Then the room roared. The county delayed the vote. Said they needed time to review all submitted materials. But everyone knew what it meant. They blinked. That night, I sat on the porch swing with Lena. Radar snored at our feet. Fireflies danced like tiny lanterns in the dark. You think they'll back off? I asked. No, she said. But they'll change tactics. She was right. Because the next morning, the bank called. Our mortgage had been quietly purchased by a holding company, one with ties to Greenleaf Development. They were trying to own us from the inside. It took me a minute to understand what the bank woman was really saying. Her voice was smooth, professional, almost apologetic, like she was reading from a card she didn't write. The mortgage on our land, which we'd nearly paid off, had been sold last week to a company called Burkewood Holdings. A shell, of course. Richard dug into it before sundown. Burkewood was owned by a subsidiary of Greenleaf Development. They couldn't get us through zoning. Now they were going for the jugular. Financial control. Lena stood in the kitchen holding the phone like it might explode. They think we're too tired to fight on two fronts. I rubbed my jaw, eyes fixed on the stack of legal papers on the table. They think wrong. We spent the next 2 days gathering every financial record, deed, and receipt we had. Lena pulled files from a locked metal box she hadn't touched since 2002. Tax records, grant documentation, even a letter from a retired congressman certifying her veteran status in relation to land use rights. Richard backed it all up twice, once on hard drives, once to an encrypted cloud. He wasn't taking chances. Meanwhile, Brenda Sloan's story started gaining national traction. A regional paper picked it up, then a military news blog. By the third day, a major online platform ran a feature. Veteran Family Fights HOA Takeover of Legacy Farm. The comment section was a battlefield of its own. But one thing was clear. People were paying attention now. That evening, while I was patching a section of fence, a car pulled into our drive. Old Ford Crown Vic, dusty, with a cracked windshield. Out stepped a tall man in a brown sport coat that had seen better decades. He introduced himself as Sam Jeffers, a retired USDA field agent. Said he read our story and wanted to help. I've seen these corporate takeovers before, he said. Not always by homeowner associations, but same structure. Leverage debt, fake violations, force a default, then resell to development firms. Seen it in Montana, Georgia, Texas. You folks are the first to push back this hard. Lena didn't thank him. She asked what he wanted. Just to watch, he said, and testify if needed. I kept records. Turns out, Jeffers had crossed paths with Greenleaf before. Back in 2009, he'd filed a whistleblower report that mysteriously vanished. He still had copies. Richard scanned everything by morning. That same night, a field down the road caught fire. Old Mr. Gilroy's hay barn. No power tools, no lightning, no kids. Just flames. I stood out on the porch with the others and watched the smoke roll. Didn't say a word. Richard finally muttered, "They're sending messages." Lena didn't flinch. Then let's reply. The next day, we called a town gathering. Not at the school. At the farm. Neighbors came by the dozens. People who'd stayed quiet too long. Veterans. Single moms. A beekeeper who'd lost half his land to zoning reclassification. A retired judge who'd been edged out of his own orchard. Lena stood on a flatbed trailer like it was a ship's deck. She wore her navy blues, not out of nostalgia, but as a declaration. And she told the story. All of it. With maps, documents, recordings, footage. No anger, just facts, cold and undeniable. Then Richard spoke. Then Sam Jeffers. Then a man from the audience who had tears in his eyes when he said his brother lost their ranch in a similar fight. Same tactics, same silence. We ended the meeting with a simple resolution: collective resistance. If they come for one, they deal with all. It was risky. If Greenleaf wanted escalation, this was giving them an excuse. But the alternative was quiet surrender. Later that night, I found Lena in the barn brushing down one of the goats. You really think we can stop them? I asked. She paused. I don't know. But I know what it feels like to walk away from something worth defending. And I won't do it again. I watched her for a while, then said the one thing I hadn't said in 20 years. I'm proud of you. She looked up, smiled. Took you long enough. That moment didn't last. The next morning, we woke up to find our water shut off. No warning, no explanation, just silence from the county and a new notice nailed to the fence post. Utility termination due to district realignment. Lena read it once and said, "They want siege warfare? Let's show them what that looks like." It's funny what you start to miss when you don't have running water. The quiet drip of a faucet, the smell of fresh soap on your hands, even the steam rising off a warm plate. We made do with rain barrels and jugs hauled from neighbors. Folks drove in from miles away just to hand us bottles. No one said much. They just handed the water over like it was firewood during a storm. Lena didn't complain once. She rationed what we had, cleaned herself with wet cloths, and cooked with precision, like she'd done it on deployment 100 times before. Me? I was mad. Mad in that low, old man way that sits behind the teeth and waits for an outlet. Richard stayed close. He installed a generator-fed pump and helped me rig an old cistern system we hadn't used since the 70s. Radar barked at every wind gust, as if he knew something was coming, and it did. 3 nights after the water shut off, someone broke into the barn. Didn't steal anything. Just broke every glass jar Lena had lined up for preserves. Smashed them all. Left footprints in the dirt. Wrote one word in the sawdust with a stick. Quit. That was it. No threat, no name, just a command. Lena looked at the mess in silence. Then she swept it up. She didn't say a word until later that night. We were sitting under the carport. Her with a thermos of coffee, me picking splinters from my palm. They think we're alone, she said. They think noise dies in the dark. I looked at her. What are you thinking? She turned to me, eyes steady. I'm thinking we bring in the floodlights. The next day, we hosted the first of what Brenda later called the Fence Line broadcasts. A live stream. Simple. Just me and Lena and Richard, standing out by the paddock, talking about what had happened. The zoning, the letters, the sabotage, the mortgage trick, the water. We showed the cameras, the broken jars, the drone footage, the notice on the fence. Within an hour, 20,000 views. By nightfall, 60. The local news picked it up again. Then regional. Then national. We didn't ask for donations. People sent them anyway. $20 from Oregon. 50 from Maine. A retired Army sergeant from Arizona sent a check with a handwritten note. For standing when others sit. Then came the legal support. A pro bono group out of D.C. veterans who'd become lawyers, offered to represent us. Their lead, a sharp-tongued woman named Monique LeClaire, had the kind of resume that scared corporations. She flew in on her own dime. She sat at our kitchen table, reviewed every document, listened to every story. When we finished, she said, "You're not just fighting for your farm. You're fighting for precedent." Monique filed an injunction the next day, temporary protection status, emergency relief clause, and then something I hadn't expected, a federal investigation into Greenleaf's use of municipal leverage to acquire rural land. The tide shifted, but like any cornered animal, Greenleaf didn't retreat. They doubled down. 3 new contractors appeared at the end of our road. Unmarked trucks. Men watching through tinted windows. A drone hovered over Radar's doghouse for an hour before Richard knocked it out of the sky with a slingshot and a half-used AA battery. Then came the letter. Not from Greenleaf. From the State Agriculture Board. A formal citation. Alleged misuse of federal grazing subsidies. An audit scheduled immediately. It was absurd. We didn't even apply for subsidies. Monique laughed when she read it. They're fishing, desperate and sloppy, but the audit had to be answered. And that meant time, energy, money. Still, Lena stood firm. That night I caught her polishing her navy pins. Not for show, for grounding. This isn't just about goats and land, is it? I asked. She shook her head. No, it's about erasure. About replacing people with silence. We didn't sleep much, and at 3:17 a.m., we got the final sign. Someone cut the power to the entire property. Richard's backups kicked in. But the message was clear. They weren't done, and neither were we. We started keeping watches at night. Me from the porch, Richard from the barn, Lena from the loft window, where you could see the tree line clear to the east. Radar rotated with us, like he understood the shift in tone. This wasn't just resistance anymore. It was siege. Lena began wearing her old field jacket in the mornings. Said it had deep pockets. But I knew better. It was armor, stitched with memory. A reminder to herself that she'd survived worse. The federal investigators showed up quietly. 2 agents. Civilian clothes, one had eyes that never blinked, and a notebook that barely left his hand. They asked questions, recorded statements, photographed everything. They were interested in Greenleaf's connections to the Homeowner Association, and more specifically, the sudden wave of land seizures in counties just like ours. We're seeing patterns, one said. Shell companies, utility manipulation, quiet partnerships with local enforcement. They didn't promise anything, but they stayed for 3 hours and left with 3 boxes of evidence. Meanwhile, Monique filed a secondary suit, alleging constitutional violations tied to veterans' property rights. Her language was sharp enough to draw blood from stone. Greenleaf went silent for 3 days after that. Not a single drone, no trucks, no letters. On the 4th day, Lena called it the eye of the storm, and she was right. That evening, the county board announced a special session. Unscheduled. No agenda. Word spread fast that Greenleaf's legal team would be presenting a proposal for accelerated eco-development realignment. I called Brenda. She called everyone else. We packed that courthouse like it was Sunday in July and the preacher had promised fireworks. Old folks with lawn chairs, kids with protest signs, a few bikers from 3 towns over who just didn't like being told what to do with their land. Greenleaf's reps wore matching charcoal suits. Their lead, young, polished, robotic, clicked a remote and displayed a slideshow of green rooftops, solar panels, and bike paths that ran through what used to be our farms. Lena stood and interrupted after the 3rd slide. You forgot to show the evictions." The room went quiet. She stepped forward, calm, unshaking, held up a folder. "Sessin, these are sworn statements from 15 property owners, people pressured, threatened, or manipulated into selling land under false pretense. You've got children drawing bike lanes over graves." Greenleaf's attorney tried to object. Monique overrode him. "My client has documented attempts at financial coercion, sabotage, and illegal surveillance. We've submitted that record to state and federal authorities." A low murmur swept the room. The board chair, an old man who'd once bought boots from my father, looked pale. They tried to recess. We stood firm. By the end of the night, the proposal was shelved. Not rejected, not banned, but shelved, which, in politics, is a kind of surrender. That night, we didn't celebrate. Too early, but for the first time in weeks, the porch swing creaked under the weight of something other than dread. And then, around midnight, Brenda got a tip. A shipment had arrived under cover of darkness. Equipment for land clearing, bulldozers, fencing units, markers. Lena didn't blink. They're preparing to strike before the injunction locks in. Richard checked his gear. Then, we better move fast. By morning, we had a plan. The neighbors came early. Some brought shovels. Some brought coffee. One brought a gas-powered speaker system from the local high school football field. We turned the field bordering our land into a message. Painted signs, live streams, speakers broadcasting our story every half hour. Brenda arranged for another media crew. Monique filed for an emergency cease and desist. And then, at noon, the trucks arrived. Big, loud, mean-looking. But this time, we weren't alone. A line of people stood at the gate. Old, young, veterans, farmers, even Ella Ray, holding a sign that read, "I was wrong. This land is right." The lead driver climbed out, phone in hand, clearly waiting for the call to proceed. He never got it, because just then, 2 federal agents pulled in behind him. Flashing lights, official jackets. One of them, notebook man, walked straight up to the driver and handed him a document. "Cease order. You proceed, you go to jail." The driver backed off. So did the rest. And just like that, they turned around. No words, just defeat in diesel form, rolling back down the road. But Lena stayed where she was, arms crossed, until the last taillight vanished. Only then did she nod. "Not over," she said, "but close." It rained the morning the final papers came. Not a hard rain, not the kind that washes things away. Just steady, soft, the kind that sinks into the earth and makes things grow. Lena stood out in it without a hat, hands in her pockets, watching the gravel darken. She said nothing, but I could tell something in her finally let go. The cease and desist was reinforced by a temporary protective order, issued by the district court, now backed by a federal investigation. Monique had done what she came to do. Greenleaf backed off officially, though no one expected them to vanish entirely. They'd wait, regroup, change names maybe. But for now, they were out. And we were still here. That afternoon, a county representative drove up. Not a suit, Not a clipboard, just an old man in a truck with a badge that had lost most of its shine. He handed Lena a document, recognizing the land's protected status under the original 1953 military exemption clause. It was the same paper we'd submitted weeks ago, only now it had a seal. Now it meant something. You shouldn't have had to fight this hard, he said. Lena shook his hand. But we did, and now you won't forget it. Word spread quickly. Folks came by with casseroles and pies. Someone dropped off a hand-carved sign. Bishop Homestead, established 1909, defended 2025. Richard packed his things the next morning. Left behind 3 cameras and a folder of passwords. You never know, he said. Keep watching. He hugged Lena, then me, then Radar. The mutt howled for 5 straight minutes after the truck pulled out. Brenda kept reporting. The story turned into a documentary series. She gave Lena the final cut before anyone else. We watched it one night, the 3 of us, under the stars with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn. My favorite part wasn't the fire or the protest or even the courtroom scene. It was a moment I didn't know she'd caught. Lena in the barn, brushing the goat, humming to herself. Unshaken. Unmoved. Ella Ray sent a letter. A real one. Apologizing again with a check enclosed. Her entire payout from Greenleaf, signed back over to the local Veterans Assistance Group. Said she was done being used. I started fixing up the east fence. The one I'd been putting off since spring. Every nail in place felt like punctuation on a story that mattered. Monique called once more before flying out. Said the lawsuit was likely to expand beyond our town. Other veterans were stepping forward. Other farms. Maybe even a congressional hearing down the line. She asked Lena if she'd testify. Depends, Lena said. Is there a dress code? I laughed. Monique didn't. There will be, she said. But I think you'll define it. That evening, I poured 2 cups of coffee and took them out to the porch. Lena sat beside me, arms relaxed, gaze somewhere past the treetops. You miss the Navy? I asked. She took a sip. Sometimes. But I never had goats in the Navy. We sat there until the stars came out. The porch swing creaked. Radar snored. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. I just felt home. This land had been fought for twice now. Once by my grandfather, with his bare hands and borrowed tools, and once by us, with documents, witnesses, and the quiet rage of people who refuse to be erased. The Homeowner Association lost. But more than that, they were seen. Their tactics exposed. Their silence broken. Lena turned to me before we went in for the night. Next spring, she said, we build the orchard back. I nodded. Next spring, because some roots run deeper than fear. And some land fights back. Ours just happened to wear Navy boots when it did.